For decades, the economic engines of the Gulf operated on a simple formula. In the early 2000s, oil revenues made up over 80% of government budgets for both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. But surging populations and a global transition toward renewable energy placed a strict expiration date on that model. Eventually, the wells would stop pumping. Rapidly building a non-oil economy became the only way for these nations to survive the inevitable collapse of the rentier state. Saudi Arabia launched Vision 2030, marshaling its sovereign wealth fund to engineer an industrial overhaul from the top down. Next door, the UAE responded with the D33 agenda. Led by Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Dubai aimed to double its economy by 2033, fighting to keep its crown as the region's premier business hub. The result is a trillion-dollar race between two very different philosophies to determine which economic architecture will dominate the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is building new cities and industrial zones from scratch, committing over $1 trillion to mega developments stretching across the Red Sea coast. But infrastructure needs tenants. To fill these new centers, the government introduced the Regional Headquarters Program, presenting multinational corporations with a blunt ultimatum: relocate your Middle Eastern leadership to Riyadh or lose the right to bid on lucrative Saudi government contracts. This forced migration is happening even though foreign-owned companies face a flat 20% corporate tax rate inside the kingdom. By leveraging the massive scale of its domestic market, Saudi Arabia is demanding corporate loyalty and pulling the center of regional gravity toward Riyadh. The UAE countered with fiscal agility. This chart outlines the tax divide. The Emirates formalized a competitive 9% federal corporate tax, while keeping a 0% rate intact across its designated free zones, compared to Saudi Arabia's 20% levy. The two nations also split on how to attract people. Saudi Arabia leans on its deep cultural and historical roots, drawing tens of millions of pilgrims to Islamic holy sites every year. Dubai continues to expand its lifestyle-driven entertainment sector, pulling in nearly 19 million international visitors annually, with a focus on hyper-modern luxury. Caught in the middle, multinational corporations developed a workaround. This network map illustrates the hub-and-spoke model. Companies keep their intellectual property and executive teams in tax-efficient Dubai, while extending single-branch offices into Riyadh to satisfy the Saudi contract mandates. In practice, global businesses are exploiting the fiscal strengths of the Emirates while doing the bare minimum necessary to access Saudi capital. This carefully calculated rivalry collided with physical reality when regional conflict flared in early 2026, leading to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. As these crucial maritime routes were completely blocked, the flow of exports stalled. It exposed a critical weakness in both strategies. They still relied on selling oil to pay for the transition away from it. Facing a total export freeze, Saudi Arabia activated its east-west petroline. As this map shows, the kingdom rerouted its crude production away from the vulnerable eastern straits, pushing it entirely to the western Red Sea coast. But the disruptions still slashed Saudi oil production by 30%. Facing an instant deficit of $130 million a day, the government had to abruptly downsize its flagship Giga-Projects, visually compressing their massive footprints to manage the cash shortage. The crisis proved that these massive industrial ambitions depend entirely on maritime security and a reliable fiscal runway. The United Arab Emirates took a different path, executing a historic exit from OPEC. By leaving the cartel, the UAE seized total autonomy over its production levels, unchaining itself from collective quotas. At the same time, the Emirates accelerated their logistics network. They secured alternative global trade corridors and leveraged their mature port infrastructure to maintain supply chains far from the conflict zones. When we look at the final score, the impact of these different approaches is clear. By early 2026, the UAE pushed its non-oil GDP to 77.3% of its total economy, while Saudi Arabia reached 55.6%. The Gulf now operates as a dual-hub ecosystem, where the brute force of Saudi Arabia's domestic market competes with the agile resilience of the UAE. In a post-oil era defined by volatility, a successful blueprint depends on adaptability as much as scale.